I spoke to Natalie Alhonte on U.S. Cuba relations and the future dialogue between the two countries. She is the Associate Director at the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council. I asked her thoughts on Cuba being removed from the U.S. terrorism list.
If you look at the terrorism list right now, Cuba is one of 4 nations, and where the differences lie in the amount of violence and the threat to national security that the other 3 nations pose to the United States, and you compare that to Cuba, there's no reason to keep Cuba on that list. And the reason why it's so critical for Cuba to get off of that list is because it restricts them from having access to the international financial, all the markets.
The banks,
yeah, and also to multilateral and financing institutions like the World Bank and the IDB and the Inter-American Development Bank. So it's really critical for Cuba to come off that list.
It is paying with cash for a lot of transactions, they say. Secretary of State John Kerry came out and he said the question of removing Cuba from the list is really not part of the negotiations, but is instead an evaluation. And he said the State Department would actually look at it based on congressionally mandated criteria. What does that mean? He said the department must determine whether Cuba in the last 6 months has engaged in any type of international terrorist acts. This seems like a pretty broad statement.
Absolutely. I think that in December, when Obama announced the first round of changes that was going to lead to this new diplomatic day for Cuba and the United States, one of the things he asked Secretary Kerry was to do an expedited review of the state terrorism list, because he understands how critical that is for Cuba. And he asked for that to be expedited. It was usually a 6-month review, but with the Summit of the Americas coming up in Panama in April, I think that my guess would be that insiders are really hoping to press that along so the president can make a big announcement at the summit in Panama.
So you think that this is a real possibility then?
I think that a lot of people who are looking at the issue realize that there needs to be a big announcement to continue the momentum in political capital. If not in April at the summit, within the next few months, because everyone's sort of waiting for that to happen, and the president has asked that to be expedited.
Can you see the U.S. going through with full normalization of relations with Cuba still on the state list?
I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that the president's going to do everything in his power to normalize the relationship. But don't forget, Congress has a lot that it's going to have to do to start to break away and chip away at the embargo that's been in place for over 50 years. So when you look at what the president can do, I think that we're going to see him do everything in his full power, including taking Cuba off the list. But then there's going to be a lot of work that has to happen in Congress to be able to really restore the kind of relationships that we have with other nations in the region.